Okay, welcome to the preliminary budget adoption special board meeting. We do have a couple of board action items as well on top of our agenda this evening, well, this afternoon. So if you all would please join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Councilwoman Freeman.
Present.
Councilman Perticone.
Here.
Councilwoman Romeo.
Here.
Councilman Weiner.
Here.
Attorney for the town.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll talk about adopting the preliminary budget. Diana, what's in front of us here now, what we have?
Okay, so the town board has a listing, it's got the title Amendments by the Town Board to the 2022 Tentative Budget. These are the revisions that the town board discussed and approved after the two budget workshops that we had. These changes were incorporated into the tentative budget to create the preliminary budget. These changes result in a decrease of the tax rate of 1 cent per thousand. It maintains the sewer special assessment at the same rate as 2021, and the storm drainage assessment is seeing an increase of 16 cents per unit from the 2021 rate.
Okay, so I need a motion to accept the preliminary budget.
John, before we make a motion,
What we'll discuss after we get a motion.
I would like to make a motion before this for something.
I'm gonna make a motion on the preliminary budget, and then we can discuss it.
Moved?
Second.
Second.
Okay, now, discussion.
Again, I would like to make a motion that the part-time position for the Office 4 clerk for the Arundecoy Commission Advancing Racial Equity, or I-CARE Commission, be included back into the budget of $18,190.36. This is a position that it has been eliminated, but there has been given no adequate reason as to why. The work of this employee is exemplary. That worker's contribution to the work of the commission is invaluable, and I am quite aware that we do have enough funds to fund her position. If we could find funds in the budget to add an uninspected librarian promotion, then I think we have an obligation to do it for this. If this town is seriously serious about being an anti-racist community and making sure that all of our members are welcome and cherished, then we must give this commission everything it needs in order to be successful. So I make a motion that we include this in the budget.
Is there a second?
Currently, that position was funded to the end of the year.
Correct.
And where was,
The intention was to roll the duties of that position into what is the title of the job?
Constituent services.
well, with that position, no one made that information available to the person when she applied. It has not happened since. I have not, as chairperson of I-CARE, received it, nor has the vice chairs received anything, and we have not had adequate discussion. And there are members here, including vice chairs from the commission, who would like to speak, and on yesterday were told they could not speak, and also informed that they could not speak today. Therefore, I would like to read into the record the letter that they would like to be to have made known. Because there's no public input today, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. October 26, 2021, Mr. John Progon, Acting Supervisor, Councilwoman Patrina Freeman, Councilwoman Kimmy Romeo, Councilman Peter Wanger, Town Attorney. Dear Mr. Procone and members of the Town Council, we, the members of ICARE, the Arundecoid Commission Advancing Racial Equity, are a group of individuals appointed to review, identify, develop, and make recommendations about town policies, procedures, practices, and programs to seek to build and grow a more equitable community as part of our charge. As a volunteer commission, we do our part to ensure Arundecoid is a community where each individual is respected, valued, and cherished, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, or cultural identity. With that in mind, we want to discuss with you today the part-time clerk position held by, and I will not mention the employee's name, but use their initial, JAL. We are asking that this clerk position is reinstated for the fiscal year 2022. The current clerk has been an integral part of ICARE Commission and lends her skills, expertise, while assisting in providing project management for our group and additional duties assigned to her. To remove funding for this position not only impacts the workers' livelihood, but calls into question your commitment to diversity, to diversifying town staff, and to creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community within this town's borders. This 20 to 25 hour a week position has foremost assisted ICARE Commission with technical support in the form of research, training coordination, providing timely feedback with all group members, supporting IPD's written report and plan for the Governor's Executive Order 203. They actually gave peer review for that, which was given to the town board. Information that assisted the town library in advancing equity, that engage youth as they prepare to review their catalogs for to be more inclusive. If the council and the town leadership can find money to support the hire of 3 officers, why can't we do the same for the part-time position with the American Rescue Plan or CARES Act dollars, which are designated to assist low-income and minority populations? We believe that a continued commitment to ICARE and the necessary administrative support is consistent with the activities that will lead to a stronger community. It also demonstrates that Arundecoid's leadership is set to create a positive example for other communities as opposed to propagating previous misconceptions about racism, as well as a lack of cultural inclusion and opportunities in Arundecoid. As a commission, we want the council to reaffirm their commitment to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion within our community, and your support of ICARE through the continual funding of this part-time clerk's position. Being a diverse, inclusive, and equitable community provides Arundecoid with an added strength. That strength is the collective voices and representation of all its community members. These voices lead to greater innovation, economic stability, and success to this community. Let's continue to rise above mediocrity and to a greater position of strength and accomplishment, starting with the continual support of the part-time clerk's position for ICARE Commission. We strongly encourage and recommend the addition of Mrs. JAL position as a line item in the budget, respectively, the ICARE Commission. And the next is, dear members of the board, my name is Courtney House. I am an Arundecoid resident and a participant on one of ICARE's committees. My children attend Arundecoid High School, are employed by Arundecoid businesses and with owners, and participate in Arundecoid sports. I'm here today because I feel that it is vitally important to address the town of Arundecoy's responsibility to acknowledge that systematic racism exists and thrives in our community, and in response, must continue to genuinely support programs and services designed to address diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our town's institutions, including our government. As residents and allies, my family and I have witnessed the lack of representation of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in our schools, in our police force, and in the individuals employed by the town. Our government, as leaders of diversity, equity, and inclusion, should be role models for fostering a culture of inclusion. I want to share my concerns that the town is wavering in its commitment and responsibility to support this work in shifting our community's mindset to one of inclusivity after learning that iCare's part-time clerk will be cut at the end of this year. This position has helped to advocate and support the work of iCare, helping to coordinate vital trainings, conducting research that has aided the group in supporting IPD for the Executive Order 203, and assisting the library with diversifying its collection, just to name a few successful projects. Also, this position is currently held by one of the few Black individuals employed by this town. Undoubtedly, in addition to her professional expertise, her lived experience have greatly informed the work we are trying to do and to the advancement of the iCare's mission, which is to advise the Arundecoy Town Board on how it can work to make Arundecoy a community where each individual is respected, valued, cherished, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, or cultural identity. The town designated Juneteenth as a holiday, and my family and I participated in the Juneteenth celebration. As a member of the Urban League's Power Brokers group, I felt immense pride learning that our town was going to work with the Urban League in helping first-time homebuyers. I participated in the Rents and Implicit Bias Training workshop sponsored by the iCare Commission, and as a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice, Rochester, New York chapter, or SURGE. I felt excitement and hope at the conversations we as a community were starting to have that could finally lead to change in the mindsets and behaviors. But now, with cuts to the funding that directly impact and undermine the continued success of the iCare Commission and effectively remove a back-held position from our government, I can see we are taking steps backwards. We know there are funds available for iCare's part-time clerk position because the town received thousands of dollars from the American Rescue Plan and the CARES Act. I ask, how has the town used these dollars? Did the town ask us how these dollars should be spent? Because as a resident, I don't recall having a say. My understanding is the town has recently found money to hire 3 police officers. If we can do this, surely the town can find money to keep a part-time clerk position in our budget that will help the town stay accountable to fostering a more diverse, welcoming community. We can do better. The town and its leadership must do better and honor their commitment to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion for the greater good of our community. Continue to support iCare and find a way to keep the part-time clerk's position in the budget. Thank you. Courtney House. I think all of these points are valid. I think that the way this was handled was not the best it could be, but we have an opportunity to correct that, to show that we are truly in support of what we set out in our proclamation in June 2020, what we did in establishing iCare on October 20th, 2020. It is surprising to me that the clerk hasn't even, the the clerk that has been assisting iCare has not even been in a position a good 6 months, and now we're talking about terminating, or as you say, rolling it in. There's a person that's already here. There are 288 full and part-time employees, and only 17 of them are African American. I think it's people of color. I think it's vitally important that we give this job into the budget for next year. And I want to thank the iCare members for showing up, for being persistent, and for being advocates for an equitable and welcoming and inclusive community. Thank you.
Question,
Question, Pete?
who's this person's direct report?
Well, it's on the supervisor's budget. It's supposed to be to the supervisor.
Directly, the person.
Where do they-
has
The
been-
supervisor
she
she's supposed
has-
to answer
She
to.
has reported to me.
To the supervisor,
She has
supposedly.
reported to me. It has changed after Dave Sealy left office.
Well, nobody let me know that. You say nobody let you know anything, nobody let me know
Apparently,
that.
it has changed, John.
Well,
because
why
she
has
has
it changed?
always- I don't know. Did
Okay.
you tell me? Because she reports to me.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that. She reported to Dave, then
No,
why
she
didn't she?
never, she has never
All right.
reported today.
Well, she's under the supervisor's budget,
I
so
know
she
she's
should
under the
support it.
supervisor
Where does
budget,
she
but
sit in the
I am
building?
a chairperson, and we have vice chairs. She reports to us.
Where does she sit in the building?
She sits nowhere.
She was asked, it was agreed that she will be virtual for this year.
So, we don't have any other open office clerk positions that are currently
Yes, we
unfilled?
do. Yeah. Last night, I think we have a couple, one a part-time, I believe. There is one.
This person can't fill that void?
I'm assuming she can. She wants to apply for part-time.
Well, she's already an employee.
And I don't want to overstep and interject myself into a board debate, but to the extent we're talking about the employment of a particular person that may be eligible for executive session, to the extent we're talking about a position
A budget.
and whether to continue a position within the town, that's subject to an open
Right.
meeting. So it's at the board's discretion, but I just wanted to let the board know the distinction.
Okay.
I mean,
I want to
we
make,
have an
go ahead,
open-
Pete.
We have an open position for an office clerk, and we have an office clerk that's already working here, and that we're trying to phase out one. Why can't move over to a different budget line?
And that might be a good idea, Pete, but I'm not sure that's what we're really discussing
Oh, that's
tonight.
not
We're
what-
discussing,
It doesn't affect the budget at all, because
right, and it's really, tonight is about the budget. And so back when Mr. Seeley first introduced this whole concept to us, it was a temporary thing. And then the desire was always that within the office of the supervisor, the constituent service person and another person would pick that work up once the commission got up and running. So how we reorganize that is kind of another discussion. Tonight, really, our focus is on the dollars and cents of the budget.
With all due respect, Ms. Romeo, I spoke with the head of HR and asked if his staff, when the person was hired, told that person that this job was temporary. That was never done. So it was never in anything that both Supervisor Sealy and myself, both verbally or electronically, gave that candidate. So I don't know where this temporary has come about, but that is not it.
And
That
my
is not what
understanding
occurred.
is you were told at the end of this year, it was going to probably be out of the budget.
By-
And
by
the
John-
responsibility, wait a minute,
John,
I'm
if we-
talking,
if
I'm
we- I'm
talking.
sorry,
I'm
if
talking now, it's
if-
my turn.
You guys interrupt
It's
me
my
all
turn.
the time.
It's my
You
turn
guys
now.
interrupt
I'm
me all
talking
the
now.
time. I hear
You
you,
ain't-
John,
I'm
but you're talking
talking.
about things. Please, Ms.
I-
Romeo, don't gavel.
I'm talking right now,
That's a
okay?
responsibility.
The
of
role
supervisor.
of it started out in the role of the constituent services, am I right or wrong?
No,
It didn't.
no,
Yes, it did.
no, it did not.
Yes, it did.
No, it did not, and I
It
don't. think
started
you
out
put
with our
it down.
constituent services.
No, it did not.
Yes, it did.
No, it did not.
Well, that's where we agree to disagree.
So you'll know. I asked for 3 interns. Interns. Supervisor Sealy gave me a part-time person to work with this.
Well, the way it's going to be is the constituent services position right now is open for the next administration to appoint a constituent services person.
But we're making a
And
decision.
he will take on,
We are making a decision
that
that
person-
the administration, and there's a new, I have had a problem with a lot of things
That-
that we are doing.
that-
Because there will be a new administration.
you're right.
And I don't understand why decisions are being rushed before new administration gets in, including whether or not we can keep this position. It could have stayed in the budget, and if the new administration wanted to do something else, it could have done it. My
The
question is,
decision
why
was
are they
made
doing
that
now?
the position, you are still,
Who made the
iCare
decision?
is still going to get the support,
Who made
and
the
it's going to
decision
go
and
over
when?
to constituent services.
Since, who made the decision?
I made
and
the
when?
decision.
So as acting supervisor, you made a decision without
That the
informing your
constituent,
board members.
the constituent
without
services,
informing the board
during the,
members.
during the, budget meeting, we were going to discuss it.
During a budget
Yeah.
meeting, not before,
Yeah.
and not when we can give
You were
input, and not
told
when I
that
can
this,
talk
this
to
job
the
was
vice
going,
chairs.
this
I
job
was
was
not
going to
told
be
that
done
this
by the
job
end of
was
the
gonna
year.
be done at
Listen,
IQ.
there's a motion on the floor, okay? Let's go with it. There's a motion on the floor to keep the position in the budget. There's a motion. Do I have a second?
So, but it seems like there's already open positions that this person could not be eliminated at the end of the year and deferred into the first month of the year where a consolidated decision could be made on constituent services and office clerk position. That there's already budgeted office clerks that are the positions that are open.
If you want to hire
They're already hired. And
yeah,
there's-
but I'm talking about if the vacancies are in a whole different department though, Pete. They're not for here. The courts need a clerk. Jason, what positions are open, part-time clerks?
I think currently only in the courts.
Okay, one, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
But my understanding is this is not a funding issue. So we do have funds to do it. We specifically have the American Rescue Plan funds to do
That's
it.
got nothing to do with this.
Why doesn't it? John, I'm
It
looking
doesn't.
at the regulations just like you, and it
Yeah.
does have something to do with making sure that we deal with the disparities that are in our community between black and brown people and
Well,
how
first
those
of all, it hasn't been brought
disparities-
up at all. It's not even been it hasn't even been brought up to our
Can I finish?
consultant.
Can I have a
Go ahead,
point of
go ahead.
order?
Can I finish speaking?
Go ahead.
Okay, as I was saying, to help combat the the disparities as it happened because of the pandemic. So I don't understand if we can do it for officers to pay and we can do it for DPW folks, we cannot do it for an ICARE person. You can just fund it for the year if you want, but I want to know why we can't do it.
Go ahead.
Point of order.
Point of order.
I believe that the funding and the mechanisms and the budget we're discussing tonight is not the ARPA money. This is the town budget. They're two completely separate things. So if you want to bring that up when we have the public meetings about the ARPA money, that's great, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. They're two different pots of funding.
I understand what you're saying, but I still have not, I feel, and I would want to ask my vice chairs, do you feel that we have adequately
This-
found out why this position has
Don't
been
go
eliminated?
asking questions. This is not the public hearing, okay?
I can ask them,
No.
John.
I will say, there is a public hearing on November 4th, and Town Code Section 36-4 does not allow public input on a matter scheduled for public hearing until the public hearing. And the reason for that is, if there are opposing viewpoints among the public on an issue, both sides of the issue have a chance to speak at the public hearing, so it's not a unilateral debate.
No, and I understand what you're saying, Andrew, but this is different. These are not regular residents. They are commission members of ICARE, which is something that is coming out of the supervisor office. So if the library can have their trustees and other folks address us, if the recreation department can have other employees to address us in this, then this should be able to happen. We don't have employees because we just started, but they are as valuable. And my thing is I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to be heard. And if they feel like fighting to have this included, they need to be heard. There's no reason for them, in my point of view, the way I look at it, that they cannot be heard.
They will be heard on November the
But
4th,
the
our
decision
public
is
hearing.
already, the decision
No,
is done.
it's not. Do we adopt the budget? We adopt the budget on November 16th. That's when
John,
the budget is adopted.
I just sat here and
Okay.
watched the library on
Okay.
yesterday come before this body to lobby for $1,600 so they can have a promotion and have an extra full-time librarian. and people were, that works closely with the director, were allowed to speak. I do not understand why the people who are most invested in this and most affected by this cut cannot speak and say
The people that were
why this
speaking
environment-
about that were the people that were on the library board here to give us their budget. That's who
But
was
they're volun-
talking.
But they're
And it was
volunteers as
it was
well.
a collective bargaining agreement.
They
that
are,
it was-
John, they're
but
volunteers.
they were here,
as well.
to discuss the library budget. That's
They're
what they were here
volunteers
for.
as
Point of
well.
order, Mr.
Yes,
Supervisor?
go ahead.
I believe the other person that spoke with the library group yesterday was the treasurer of that group, and so
Yes.
it was imperative they
And then there
spoke.
was Greg, who is executive director of the library as well, too.
It was there, but it was given by the treasurer. But they are volunteers
Okay,
as well.
there is a November the 4th, there is a public hearing on all our budgets. There is a motion on the floor.
Can you restate what the motion is, please?
The motion is that we would reinstate into the 2022 budget the office clerk 4 position for eye care.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
You
Opposed.
please say that you're
I
opposed.
just said it.
You
I'm
said it,
opposed.
but Kimmy raised her hand.
Opposed.
Thank you.
Opposed.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have to adopt the preliminary budget, correct?
Correct.
Do I have a motion on the floor to adopt the preliminary budget?
Moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No, and I am opposing it because we have not added in the eye care person. We have not kept our promise to the community and to these community volunteers that we would do and devote all our resources and that we can give them to be successful. So I'm a no vote.
Okay, she's a no. Pete?
No, I was yes, but I would encourage everyone from the iCare again to come and speak at the public hearing.
Okay, motion passes. Preliminary budget passes. All right, we have a couple board actions, items for board action. Barb?
Item number 2, scheduling a public hearing pertaining to a change of use and disposition of the Pine Grove Recreation Center, which has been improved with funds from the Community Development Block Grant Program.
Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Is there gonna be some explanation after I get the second?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
second.
Okay, Diana, go ahead.
Thank you. This resolution is to call a public hearing regarding the Pine Grove Senior Center. Back several years ago, the town utilized CDBG federal funds to make improvements to the building. Now that a change of use is being proposed, HUD, the federal government, requires that we have a public hearing for the residents to be, to have a chance to speak about their feelings on that. So this is required by HUD with the senior center being relocated to the ICC at the mall, at the center.
What's the change of use from senior center to vacant? Or there's another use being proposed?
Well, what was it, do we actually know the total? See, it depends on the total amount that we invested in the building, right? It was out of the senior, the monies, right?
Right.
So then we actually, they're gonna give it and let us spend it,
That's a whole nother issue
right?
with the funding.
After we sell the building.
It's proposed that the building will go up for sale. It's my understanding that we do have a prospective buyer. That buyer will not be running a senior center there. And therefore, it would be a change of use because it would no longer serve the senior community.
So it'll be a public hearing and talk about it.
So it'd be a public hearing.
Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? So carried.
Item number 3, calling for a public hearing on a proposed local law opting out of allowing cannabis on-site consumption licenses in the town of Arundequoit.
Okay, now we have two different proposals, so, Andrew, you wanna explain the difference, or both of them, and then the difference between the two?
Sure, and, you know, I'll kind of explain, give a brief recap of the state law,
Okay.
and then I'll give because there's two different proposed local laws, each proponent will have to say, I introduce the local law in this form, and then the town board will have to consider whether to adopt a resolution on one or the other, calling a public hearing. So, in March of 2021, the New York State Legislature enacted legislation legalizing adult use recreational cannabis and hemp and cannabis products in New York State. It's a very big law, there's 133 pages, but important to the town's consideration is an entity called the Cannabis Control Board will grant licenses to allow either retail dispensaries or on-site consumption businesses within municipalities. A retail dispensary is a business that sells marijuana and cannabis products. I think most people are familiar with what those are. They're pretty common in other states that have legalized marijuana. An on-site consumption business is basically a smoking bar. It would be a place that allows people to gather and smoke marijuana in a communal setting. Now, the legislation is drafted by the state and enacted by the state already imposes certain zoning and other restrictions on these businesses. These types of businesses cannot be within 500 feet of a school or 200 feet of a place of worship. And on-site consumption businesses can't allow gambling, public exposure or nudity, contests, think fighting like boxing, or fireworks. And neither type of business can sell to persons under 21 years of age. So the state law, as contemplated, will have the Cannabis Control Board granting licenses to one or both of these types of business. The state law gives municipalities like the town of Arundecoit a very narrow window to opt out of allowing either or both of these types of businesses within their borders. So by December 31st of 2021, the town board could, if it so choose, adopt a local law opting out of retail dispensaries, opting out of on-site consumption businesses, or opting out of both. And the process for that would be introducing a local law, calling a public hearing to receive public testimony, and then if the board decides to proceed after hearing the testimony, it could then adopt the local law. That local law would be subject to what's called a 45-day permissive referendum. If 10% of the town's voters said, we don't want to opt out, they could force a referendum vote, and then it would go to a popular vote for the people of the town. So we have two draft pieces of local legislation. Councilmember Freeman has introduced a local law calling for a public hearing on whether to opt out of both.
No?
Or I'm sorry, Councilmember Romeo. I know I'd screw something up. Councilmember Freeman has introduced a proposed local law to call a public hearing for opting out of on-site consumption businesses. Councilmember Romeo has introduced a proposed local law for calling a public hearing on opting out of both retail dispensaries and on-site consumption businesses.
Okay, any comments? Go ahead, anybody?
Sure. First, I'll say the reason that I am proposing that we opt out of both is because the only way we can invite the public to a public hearing and hear what they want to do is if we opt out of both. If we only opt out of one, then by default, we are in to the other one, and the public will absolutely not have an opportunity to comment or have any opinion about that. That'll be already done. So for us to fulfill our responsibilities in this wonderful democracy and to listen to the residents who live in the town of Arundecoit, we need to give them the opportunity to come to a public hearing and to address both.
For the measure that I am putting forth today, I think we should opt out, of course, of on-site consumption and have that public hearing, but to opt in for the retail sales. And the reason being, whether residents, whether people buy marijuana here or not, our police officers are going to have to deal with folks being impaired on our property, on the town's borders and within its lands. I want to be able to provide them extra funding, which can come from and be designated from those retail sales. Just because we don't sell it here in the town does not mean that we're going to have, if we were to pass the local law submitted by Ms. Romeo, we would not have extra resources to do that. That's why I think being able to have retail here will help us generate funds that the towns can use to help curb and combat any ill effects that we would have because of folks consuming or consuming and coming on our properties.
Can I speak again?
Yeah, sure, go right ahead.
Just to be clear, by us saying that we want to default or opt out, I'm sorry, we're not saying that we wouldn't allow something. We're saying this is part of the governing process. What happens is there's a public hearing. This does not codify our decision as a town board in any way. We will still have an opportunity in the future to vote and to make a decision whether we want to opt in to either or both or none. There's actually 4 options here.
So,
But we would be doing that having had the public input. So we're not codified here. This is not a law that we're passing. This is a resolution to start the process to have a public hearing. And the only way to have that public hearing and let folks respond to both issues is if we keep both doors open.
Pete?
so that's true, that if we don't have a public, I mean, if we opt out, we want to have a hearing like the Freeman measure, we can't change our mind on the retail?
I think it'd be too late. I think because there's a 45-day permissive referendum period, and because you have to notice out one of these public hearings so far in advance, I think if, whichever way you chose, if you waited till November 4th to do it, you wouldn't have enough time for the permissive referendum period.
And I would like to also say something. So this was something, just so the community knows, that the town board have talked about over several workshops. There are workshop minutes. You can get them online or request them from the clerk's office. This was the original game plan of the town board, was to opt in for retail and only opt out for consumption so that we can have that public hearing for the reasons that I stated, so that it can provide the town with extra resources so it can deal with those who will be driving, who may be driving or in our town impaired. And it would give us the resources to give to our police officers if it means that we had to hire more police officers. So if we can talk about what was said in, if you guys can talk about what was said in workshops, I can also state that very clearly, that we have talked about this and this was the original game plan. The question that I have is, what is it going to hurt for us to make sure that our town does not lose that option of a revenue stream?
We don't lose the option if we have a public hearing and listen to people's opinion. We only lose the option if, when it's time to vote on the actual law, we vote on a law that says that we don't allow it here. This is not a proposal for a law. This is
But
to
we-
start the process for a public hearing.
But we have known since the spring that this was coming up and that this deadline was happening. We
Right.
could have held, as I mentioned last night, we could have held tons of information sessions with residents to get their feedback and to let them know the intricacies of this particular statute. And the board chose not to do it. Now we're bringing something in.
Don't say the board chose not
Now-
to do it, okay? Don't say
didn't
that.
do
That's
that.
not true.
John?
You could have brought it up too, just as like
John?
any one of us could have brought it
John?
up 6 months ago if you
John?
wanted to.
I'm speaking,
Yeah,
thank you.
well, I'm responding because
So,
you're not speaking the truth.
To have this measure.
You're not telling the
before
truth.
us, to have this measure put before us, where we only have, as the attorney mentioned yesterday, 2 days to respond, I don't think is fair. I don't think it's fair to the residents. I don't think it's fair to the town board members who are wrestling with this decision.
If you would like the residents to have an opportunity to speak to both issues, then give them the opportunity to speak to both issues. Pretty simple.
Okay. Pete, anything else?
I mean, in general, I'm in agreement with both.
You feel strong, it depends, if you want to, we're going to have a public hearing regardless.
Yes.
We're going to have it on November, we're going to do it the workshop, or are we going to do it, probably the town board, right?
Best thing would be do it on the 9th.
The 9th, right,
Which is
which
the
would be our
workshop.
workshop.
But the town board would have to adopt a resolution calling the public hearing.
Yeah,
So
for one, yeah,
for one or both,
Okay.
or for one or the other, I should say. November 16th is pushing it really tight. It literally mean that the last day of the 45-day period is December 31st. and we don't want to risk
Yeah, we're right.
invalidity by
Yeah.
playing brinksmanship with.
So it's gotta be on the 9th, a public hearing on our workshop on November 9th.
So we will have to pass that now.
Yes, one of
That's-
these has to
Andrew,
pass.
if you can tell me legally, we have to pass it today?
To call a hearing, yeah. Well, you could call a hearing, so a public hearing has to be on 3 days' notice.
Okay?
So the town board would have to meet at some point 3 days before whatever public hearing date they set. I don't know that there's any meetings scheduled before the 4th, which is next Thursday.
But we can always schedule a special town board meeting like this, is correct?
Yes,
Or we can make a decision now.
That's correct.
a special board meeting's on 2 days' notice
Okay.
to the board. So, you'd have 2 days' notice and then, some special meeting. I don't know how 2 days and 3 days wouldn't get you any closer to November 4th, I don't think. I don't think you'd get any better.
So we have to have a decision by November 4th?
So today, if you want to have a public hearing on whether to opt out of either, you should probably call the hearing soon. You don't have to call a hearing at all. You could just stay on both if the board wants to. But yeah, I think if you're going to have a public hearing, November 4th is the best date.
To call a
Have,
public hearing.
to call it or to have it?
Oh,
I'm trying to see
No.
how much time that we have to do an opt-out, whichever measure it is. When does that have to kick in so we can do the 45 days?
I see. Okay. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I misunderstood the question or just.
That's okay.
So, the 45-day period counting back from December 31st gets you to November 16th. That's the day of the regular town board meeting. So I would not recommend calling a public hearing on that day
Okay,
because it's too tight a time frame.
okay.
You
But
could,
any day before that, we can.
yes. And to be fair to the town clerk, this will involve, if we have a date, let's say we pick a day, November 12th, which I don't know what day of the week that is. There would have to be filings that last week of December with the Secretary of State. So I would say any date between November 9th and the 16th, the town board could, in its discretion, call a special town board meeting and hold a public hearing on any of those days, if it so chose.
And up before that time, I'll just use the 9th as that time, talking to you. Before that time, we can have information sessions to talk to residents, to get them at least educated about what this is.
It's at the town board's discretion. They could call informational sessions if they'd like. We'd have to be careful not to accept testimony
Yeah.
at those sessions, because the statute gives one public hearing process.
Oh, no, I understand that, but I'm trying to make sure that they have ample information about the statutes, about what we're going to do, so that when they do a public input, they can do it from an informed position.
Why couldn't we post a public hearing and get information out at the same time?
The town
We
could
could do that.
certainly do, it's
And get
at
some
the town board's,
information out, so
Yeah.
they're very prepared for, if they come to the public hearing, I would like to do it on the 9th, because it's the night of our workshop, and that gives us plenty of time. So between calling the public hearing and getting some information out to the community, which I think is a good idea, get some information out what's going on, and then hopefully they'll be prepared if they want to speak during the public hearing.
And Andrew, another question, I'm sorry. New York State passing of this law was to bring a measure of social justice, social equity, because of the fact that most of the people who have been arrested and thus incarcerated have been black and brown people. So by us not opting in, we are not really meeting that requirement. Is that correct? Am I thinking?
So-
I'm asking him.
So the legislative intent of the legislature did speak to that extensively. So I could quote from it if it edifies the
Thank you,
board.
that'll help me.
This is the words of the State Assembly and Senate. The legislature finds that existing marijuana laws have not been beneficial to the welfare of the public. Existing laws have been ineffective at curbing marijuana use. They've created an illicit market in the sale of marijuana. And existing marijuana laws have been disproportionately impactful to African American and Latinx communities. So the way the legislature set this up was that by default, these sales will be legal. That was their intent. They want to end the disproportionate enforcement of drug laws. So if the town board does absolutely nothing, it'll be honoring the intent of the state legislature
I
by
understand that.
allowing the sales. By opting out, the town board is restricting those types of sales, either at on-site consumption businesses or retail dispensaries. Now, there are legitimate reasons to consider both. I think the biggest known impact of marijuana to be detrimental is its influence on cognition and motor skills.
Correct.
That creates a problem with driving. So the town board could rationally say that it wants to opt out of one or both of these types of businesses in the town borders to prevent driving while intoxicated.
And then opting out on the retail portion, if I'm understanding you correctly, does not preclude people from doing illicit sales, and thus could increase that likelihood in our town,
But
that we have the likelihood of arrest if we say that we don't want the retails here.
I think retail sales, and I think this is important for the board to understand too, is recreational use will still be completely legal, and there's a home grow component.
Okay?
Once the Cannabis Control Board drafts regulations, ordinary people will be able to grow up to 6 plants per household of marijuana. And they could easily jump in a car and unfortunately get into a motor vehicle accident after they do that. And so it will be a problem for police departments to police this either way. I think the rationale for opting out of retail or on-site consumption use would be that you don't want to concentrate impaired drivers in one area, one corridor, or one neighborhood. It's like a bar. If you have a bar on a corner, you're going to have more drunk driving on that corner. It's just obvious. So it's really, I think the issue is a good one for the town to consider, and it's really a policy decision. Does the town board want to opt out, or does it want to leave things as the state legislature intended?
Andrew, I want to thank you again, like I did yesterday, for you answering my questions, because most of the time, I was on drug-free Aronicoid, so I know this law pretty well, but a lot of times when I ask you a question, it's not just for me, it's just to make sure that those who are viewing this either remotely or in person have an understanding of what we're talking about and what the effects will be, so they can make an informed decision, as well as myself. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Mr. Supervisor, can I add one last
Sure.
statement? Because we went down the road that will probably go down in a few weeks. I just want to bring us back to where we are today. And the resolution in front of us today is to either opt out for both or for one. If we choose to opt out for only one and we allow the sale, then we've already decided for our community. I don't think that's fair. I don't think I'm here to make that decision for the whole community. I want to hear what the community has to say. The only way we get to have a public hearing and hear what the whole community wants is to follow this resolution to opt out for both, have the public hearing, and then vote. We're not voting on the law, we are voting on who we listen to and on what terms.
And I'll say my last thing to this. I hear you, my esteemed colleague, but we are voted by the residents of this town to make decisions ourselves every day.
Well, I like making them with the input of the public. I'm not sure how you like to make them.
No, I like to make it with
Understood.
the input with the public as well, but we just had a decision that was made about eye care, and it was not allowed to have
Okay,
input
okay,
from the
let's not
public.
beat it to death, all right?
No,
All
I hear
right?
you, John, but
All
I
right,
have
we're
a
talking
right
about
to
something
speak.
different
I
now,
have a
okay?
right to
All right, we're
speak.
talking about something
But
different
I
now,
have
okay?
my right to speak and
All
to
right.
use what I need to.
So that's what's on the floor. Either we opt out of both and we have a public hearing and listen to the residents decide, or listen to their feedback on whether it's, they want to sell, they want to have consumption, or both. Or we have a public hearing, but we already made a decision on the sale, and if they would like to have the consumption on site, right?
Yes. Can I make a
So-
resolution? I'd like to make a resolution that we opt out on both, and I'd like a second for that.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to opt out of both. Do I have a second?
There's already a motion on the floor to opt out on one.
I don't believe we ever made a motion, sir.
No, we just,
I think if we refer to our agenda, the order of a voting for town matters should go on the order of the agenda, so we should look at which one is this listed
Okay.
and take that up first. And taking one up or the other first might moot the other one
All
anyway.
right, local opt-in out of on-campus site, license of the town board.
So the agenda item
There's only one on
Is
my
only-
agenda.
There's only one, but we had,
yeah,
so the first one is Councilwoman's Romeo,
I think,
correct?
but it makes more logical sense to do the partial one first and have that vote and then do the one that has both. It logically makes sense.
Well, what's on that, we going by the agenda, so what's the first one on the
It's-
agenda, though?
it's at the supervisor's discretion, but the
Okay.
one that's listed on the agenda is consumption only.
Right, the other
And
one is
given-
not listed.
Given the potential to moot that resolution, it probably would make sense to take up the Freeman legislation first.
Okay,
All right, I make a motion that the town board adopt a public hearing to opt out of the on-site consumption of marijuana in the town.
okay, the first one to, and call a public hearing on that, do I have a second on that?
I'm in general, I agree with this, but I'm gonna not second it, because I do think we're kinda, I don't like the way this is all situated. I don't like opting out in order to have a public hearing, but I feel like that's the only way to effectively hear the public, and
Okay,
I'm gonna remain silent.
okay. There's no second on that motion. Okay, I need a motion on opting out of both, calling a public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I oppose.
So carried. Option out of both, and we will have a public hearing on November the 9th at our workshop. Okay, Barb? Okay, with that, it ends our business. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So carried.